Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. Iran today demanded an apology from Security Council members for imposing a third set of sanctions over the country's nuclear program. While the Security Council discusses Iran's nuclear activities, we go back 5 years to an early discussion about the nuclear capabilities of another country, Iraq. In 2002 and 2003, the Bush administration made the case for waging war on Iraq by claiming Saddam Hussein was developing nuclear weapons and other, quote, weapons of mass destruction. President Bush first approached the United Nations General Assembly about Iraq on September 12, 2002. He urged member states to support action against Iraq, but also hinted that the United States could act alone, even without the support of the United Nations.
Delegates to the General Assembly, we have been more than patient. We've tried sanctions. We've tried the carrot of oil for food and the stick of coalition military strikes. But Saddam Hussein has defied all these efforts and continues to develop weapons of mass destruction. We will work with the UN Security Council for the necessary resolutions. But the purposes of the United States should not be doubted. The Security Council resolutions will be enforced. The just demands of peace and security will be met, or action will be unavoidable.
Although the Bush administration never got the Security Council resolutions they needed, they did try their best to pressure undecided Security Council members to support the Iraq invasion. Chile, along with Mexico, Pakistan, Cameroon, Angola, and Guinea, were the 6 undecided members of the Security Council during the lead-up to the war. Heraldo Munoz, the Chilean Ambassador to the United Nations, has written an insider's account of that period, revealing new details of how the United States bullied its allies and threatened reprisals against those withholding support. His book is called A Solitary War, a Diplomat's Chronicle of the Iraq War and its Lessons. Ambassador Heraldo Munoz joins us in our Firehouse studio here in New York, just down the road from the United Nations. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you.
It's good to have you join us. At the time of the invasion, you actually were still in Chile.
Yes, I was minister in the cabinet of President Ricardo Lagos at the time. But I was very much in touch with the debate because, among other things, I got phone calls from Washington lobbying the position to use force against Saddam Hussein. In fact, I say in the book that Condoleezza Rice called me, and we had a half-an-hour phone call where she tried to argue in favor of a resolution that would have authorized the use of force in Iraq and invade Iraq with the support of the Security Council. And I argued against, thinking that this was going to have tremendous consequences at the global level on neighbors of Iraq. Internally, in terms of the contradictions that we knew that existed already, and in the world economy. And she answered that in the end, bottom line, the United States was going to go in Iraq with or without the United Nations. And that was very clear to me that there was a decision to invade Iraq, even though some of the countries, friendly countries, allies of the United States, had honest differences and opposed the use of force outside the Security Council and without meeting certain conditions, benchmarks, to find out if there was indeed a cache of weapons of mass destruction, as was the argument of the United States. We didn't know. We had to give time to the UN inspectors to find out whether that was the case or not. So we insisted, coinciding with the United States, that any weapons of mass destruction in the hands of an unreliable regime is a danger. But you have to make sure that that is the case.
And to get back to this call from Condi Rice, you mentioned it in your book, and it came when exactly, and why would she call you? As you mentioned, you were in the ministry, in the government then, but were not actually at the UN.
Well, I was one of the political ministers, one of the relatively important ministers in the cabinet of the president. I was Minister Secretary General of the government. So I had access to the president, ready access to the president. In addition to that, Condi and I had been classmates. So during our PhD at the Graduate School of International Studies in the University of Denver. So we knew each other, and we had had contact before.
And you're both protégés of Madeleine Albright's father?
That's right. We both studied under Joe Corbell, Madeleine Albright's father, so we have an additional linkage, even though she was the favorite student of Corbell's because she decided to study Soviet affairs and foreign policies of the former Eastern European countries, while I dedicated myself to international political economy. Nevertheless, we both had a very strong relationship with Corbell. But so she called me, I think, trying to convey a message in an official capacity, but also using the friendly channels that we had established. And I conveyed this to the president. And what we try to do with other countries was to say, fine, we recognize that Saddam may be a threat, but in order to authorize the use of force, we have to make sure that there is evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And for that, we want a series of benchmarks, of tasks that Saddam Hussein will have to comply within a limited period of time. And if that doesn't work, then we may decide the use of force. But the United States did not want to wait, basically.
What about the pressure that those undecided members of the Security Council were under in those months, those early months of 2003, and what kind of efforts did the United States make, other than obviously than these phone calls, to try to get the votes of those members?
Well, there were abundant phone calls, of course. My president, President Lagos, was called by President Bush on several occasions. He talked to Prime Minister Blair, looking for an intermediate solution that was at a moment between the British and Chile and the other undecided, the possibility of an outcome that never was. And in addition to that, by the way, there were pressures from those that were fully opposed, without a doubt, to the invasion, meaning France. President Jacques Chirac talked to Lagos and to other world leaders in the Security Council. But the pressure, I think, is as I say it in the book, expresses itself in nuanced warnings. Like, for example, a memorandum has emerged in the Spanish ministry showing that President Bush mentioned that the free trade agreement between Chile and the United States hadn't been finished. And that could be endangered if Chile did not go along the way that the United States thought we should in Iraq. And a warning was made as regards Angola, that perhaps the Millennium account that benefited development goals of Angola could be also in danger if there was not, if Angola did not follow the U.S. Or the U.S.-British posture. So there were veiled, I would say, warnings, but nevertheless, here was a fundamental principle at stake for countries like Chile, and that was respect for multilateralism, respect for the Security Council and the Charter of the United Nations, that you use force as a last resort once all diplomatic efforts have been exhausted, and then you make sure that there are weapons of mass destruction. Evidence and history has shown that we were right, and the cost in terms of lives, in terms of treasure, have been tremendous, and that, I think, leaves us quite satisfied about what we did, even though relatively small countries, we stood up our ground on questions of principle.
Ambassador Munoz, I wanted to turn to a clip from an interview that we did with a British whistleblower named Catherine Gunn. The former British intelligence employee was charged with violating the Official Secrets Act because she'd leaked details of a secret U.S. spy operation on UN Security Council members in the run-up to the Iraq invasion.
I was working for Government Communication Headquarters in the UK, which is the equivalent to NSA here in the US. And I was a Chinese linguist at the time, and this email crossed my desk in my inbox in January of 2003. At that time, as we all know, it was a crucial time for the UN in its decision-making process as to whether or not a resolution was needed with regard to Iraq and its alleged weapons of mass destruction. So when I saw this email asking GCHQ's help to bug the 6 swing nations to get a